I'm I'm not crying because of the beauty of the meat. It's the smoke in my eyes. But it is gorgeous. Look at that. Nothing's more exciting than sizzling beef. Hey there, I'm Sohla el-waylly, and this is Ancient Recipes with Sohla. In each episode, we take a dish you may recognize and attempt to recreate one of the oldest versions of it to ever exist. So it's a little cooking, a little history, and a whole lot of me. What's not to love? All right, we're back. We're back in the Ancient Recipes kitchen, and I missed it so much. I missed my ancient tools, my ancient bowls, my ancient friend GIF.
GIF smash.
We're gonna make you a star, GIF. We're gonna kick off our summer episodes with ancient barbecue. There's nothing more summery than grilling. Good food, good music, good friends. Okay, I'm starting to sound a little bit like a chain restaurant commercial. Almost every culture or region has their own version of barbecue because it kind of boils down to cooking something, usually meat, over open fire. So today we're gonna make two types of barbecue from two cultures across the globe. We're gonna try and recreate the original Korean bulgogi, which is one of the oldest types of barbecue that you can still find today. And we are going to make Taino barbacoa using their traditional grill made of branches suspended over wood. That is also where you get the name barbecue, and it's the start of barbecuing becoming popular throughout Western civilization. All right, we are actually gonna be grilling and chilling outside. I'm super excited, but the key to having a good time when you're grilling is to do as much prep indoors as possible. So I'm gonna start by marinating the bulgogi. So the original version of bulgogi was actually called maekjeok, and it comes to us from the Three Kingdoms period in Korean history. It was traditionally made with pork and usually just a simple marinade of garlic and soy sauce. But we're gonna use some other ingredients that were around in 700 AD. All right, I'm gonna start with some doenjang. This is a fermented soybean paste. It's currently very popular in Korean cuisine. It's very funky, salty. It has like a lot of savory umami situation. All right, so I'm also adding some garlic, ginger, and we're gonna sweeten it up with a little bit of fermented plum syrup. This is a really cool sweetener you can find pretty easily today as well. And you just make it by like packing plums with sugar, and then you let it hang out for like 3 months. It gets really funky, tart, and sweet. It's really fun to use. I'm also adding some soy sauce. They wouldn't have had soy sauce like this back then. It would be more likely that they used the runoff of a fermented soy paste called jiang. But around 700 AD, something similar to the soy sauce we use today was getting popular throughout China, Korea, and Japan. And then we're gonna add a little bit of toasted sesame oil, and we're gonna mix it up. So there's a lot of salt in here, a lot of acidity from those fermented things, a nice bit of sweetness, and you're gonna get some heat from the garlic and ginger, so it's like really nicely balanced. The sugar in here is gonna help the meat caramelize when we put it on the grill. The acidity and salt in here is gonna make sure that our beef gets like super nice and tender, but we're also slicing it really thin. It's gonna have a really nice tender texture, but also it gets some nice crunch from like the char. We're gonna get some good char outside. So my marinade is all mixed up. Now we slice the beef. Here I've got a ribeye. They wouldn't have had a cut exactly like this, but I've seen it made with ribeye pretty often these days. And we're gonna slice this as thinly as possible across the grain. So the first slices, you know, they're not gonna be the thickest, but as we keep going, it's gonna be awesome. I'm going for like as thin as my knife will allow. So that's somewhere between 1 millimeter and 2 millimeters. So my meat is really nicely chilled, and that helps. So this is gonna make sure that the marinade like really coats every bit of this meat. It's gonna be very flavorful, really well seasoned. We're only gonna marinate it for like 30 minutes while we prep our fish, but you could marinate it for a little bit longer. So you can see now that we've gotten past that tip, we're getting nice wider pieces that are gonna be easier to skewer. But because we are skewering it, those little bits are gonna be easy to turn on the grill too. So bulgogi actually has a really interesting history. It kind of like came and went throughout Korean history. It started out during the Three Kingdoms period in the form of this maekjeok skewered pork dish. But then Buddhism got really popular, so people were eating less beef And then there was a decline in bulgogi, but that's when banchan came around. That's my favorite part of Korean barbecue. Those are the little fermented vegetable sides that just keep getting refilled. And that's when banchan got popular. So banchan and bulgogi are almost like star-crossed lovers. They didn't start out at the same time, but they found each other later on. Because now you can't have bulgogi without all of the banchan. Okay, so now I'm gonna marinate my beef. I like to take a sec and make sure I get a little bit of smear on everybody, you know? By the mid-13th century, the Mongol Empire had taken over the Korean peninsula, and they loved beef. So bulgogi was back. It came back in the form of seo ryamyuk, a brothy dish, as well as neo biryani, which is very similar to the bulgogi we know and love today. But back then, it was reserved for the royals. But then bulgogi had another decline. It's just ups and downs for poor bulgogi. Korea became a part of the Empire of Japan in between 1910 and 1945, and there was a beef shortage. So it fell away from popularity, and then it came back again, though. In the 90s, better and bigger than ever, bulgogi was back, and it became one of the most popular dishes in Korea. We're mostly coated. I'm going to get in here, gentle toss to get those last few pieces of meat. It's generously seasoned. So this is for my friends who like a lot of flavor. Everybody's covered, and now I'm going to start skewering. Just grab a piece of meat, and then you want to kind of thread it right on here. You don't want to scrunch it up too much. You want to make sure that the meat gets nice, access to the heat. We want to develop some char, some color. So if you just scrunch it all on there, you're going to have these little folds of meat in the middle that don't get any love. Kind of stretch it out when we get over here. See what I'm saying? So, wait, I'm going to poke you in there. This doesn't have to be perfect. We have random little pieces of meat, so get it on however you can. So I also went with ribeye like this. When I was slicing it, some of the fat kind of falls off. It doesn't want to stay attached to the strip. So I just go back and I thread that through in between every piece here now and again, so it'll kind of char and melt when we go on the grill and flavor the pieces of meat next to it. Who doesn't love meat on a stick? I think this is the best way to make friends. This is just a big old piece of fat, which I'm into. Don't waste these. They're gonna add so much flavor to whatever else it's around. My husband's favorite pieces are the fat. All right, these are gonna hang out. The marinade's gonna keep doing its thing, and then I'm gonna prep our snapper. Okay, for our version of barbacoa, we're gonna take a bunch of spices that are native to Puerto Rico that the Tainos people would have had access to and create a balanced blend for smearing on top of our fish before we cook it outside. So the first thing I'm gonna do is score and salt my fish. Whenever I'm cooking whole fish, I like to score it because it not only helps it cook more evenly, but it makes it easier to tell when it's done because you can just get in there and poke the flesh. I also feel like it makes it easier to serve because it can just pull the pieces of meat off. So I'm going right down to the spine. Don't be scared here. This is not a huge fish, so I'm just gonna do 2 on either side. Okay, now I'm gonna salt it right away. We're gonna make sure we get into those scores and get into the cavity. Salting it right away like this also it's almost gonna quickly dry brine a little bit while we prepare the blend of herbs and spices that are gonna go on top. And it's gonna make it stay juicy. Always get the inside. This is the tastiest part of the meat too, this belly bit. You can cut off the fins, but I like them for drama, All right, now I'm gonna make kind of a paste to smush on top. I'm gonna start with some allspice berries. This is very common in Latin America and the Caribbean, and you can also find it a lot in the Middle East, often in grilled meat. So I feel like it's like the barbecue spice. It tastes like a combo of cinnamon, nutmeg, clove. Cinnamon, nutmeg, clove. I feel like one more. Black pepper. That's why it's allspice. It's all of the spice. I want to make it as fine a powder as possible, so I'm giving it some solo attention in here before I add the wet stuff. Okay. Now I'm going to tip this back into here and grind up our annatto. It smells so good already. We've only got a teaspoon. You don't need a whole lot. Okay, so here I have some annatto seeds. These are the seeds of the achiote plant. It's a lot like turmeric. The flavor is not super easy to describe, but you miss it if it's not there. But more importantly, it's used for its very deep, rich red orange hue. It's originally from the Caribbean, but it is pretty much all over the world. It's used a lot in commercial production. It's what makes margarine a little bit yellow. We're just smashing it up. Should we kick you? You're doing great, though. Since these things have gotten a head start, I'm gonna put them back in here, and they're gonna get smashed up with everything else. So, what else is going in here? Right here, I've got Mediterranean oregano, but what they would have used is oregano brujo, which is also called Cuban oregano. It has more of a minty vibe than Mediterranean oregano, but use whatever you've got. Now, culantro. So I know it sounds like cilantro. It actually tastes a little bit like cilantro, but it does not look like cilantro. It's definitely a different plant, but it has the same kind of grassy notes of cilantro, but it's a lot stronger. So you want to use less of it. And because it is stronger, it works better for like long cooking. Like normally when you're using regular cilantro, it's reserved for finishing stuff at the end because the flavor is so delicate and you lose it. It gets like muddy if you cook it for too long. Not this stuff. This is used a lot in the Caribbean, like the base for every goat curry is this green mixture with a whole bunch of culantro, and it gets cooked down for hours, and the flavor really mellows out in a pleasant way. And now, the ají dulce. I think this might be the most important ingredient. Did you get good images of the most important ingredient? Okay, ají dulce, it looks a lot like a habanero, but surprise, it's totally sweet. It's just got all those like same floral, perfumey notes, but no heat. And now we smush. I feel like the theme of ancient recipes is smash. So I'm gonna add a big pinch of kosher salt, not just to season, but the coarseness is gonna help us smash. I'm gonna get it started, and then I'm gonna add a little bit of lard. The lard's just gonna help it stick, and like fat helps flavors, develop, transfer, do their thing. Flavors love fat. Fat loves flavor. This already smells very good. It's that allspice. It smells like all of the spices. Give smash? It's time. The people demanded. You gotta give them what they want.
Let me at it.
I don't even need to be in this episode anymore. It should just be like 20 minutes of you smashing. Now that it's kind of got going, let's add some lard. Delicious lard. It'll help bring it together into a paste, make it easier to spread, stick to the fish, heat transfer, flavor transfer. Lard is like the best ingredient. That's looking pretty good. You've achieved paste. Okay, I've got my paste. Doesn't it look good? Now, our paste is just gonna get smeared inside out, both sides, in the cavity. Smush it on. It won't be perfect, but it's gonna be delicious. You know what? Before I get too committed to the sides, I'm gonna go inside. You got the, whole fish. Getting inside these scores. So the history of cooking on the boucan or the barbecue goes back a really long time, but we only have written information on it since colonization. After the Spanish arrived, this technique kind of spread all over Western civilization. Everybody was grilling, and it evolved into like the whole animal barbacoa that you see today, and that name comes from this. Okay, my meat and fish are ready to go. Let's get grilling and chilling. All right, here we are. We're outside. We're actually cooking on real fire. So I'm very excited. The New York studio has been completely transported. We got sand to feel like the beaches of Puerto Rico, native plants, just surrounded by this lush tropical forest. So I'm really excited. So this is the boucan. This is the traditional grill of the Taino people. We're using oak and maple right now, but traditionally the Taino people's favorite wood to cook on was guava wood that impart like a really nice smoky flavor. We're gonna get that same vibe with our oak. I'm gonna be cooking my snapper on here, and here is our hibachi grill for the bulgogi. and let's get cooking. Here's my snapper. I'm gonna put it in the middle where it's nice and hot. And I'm gonna just let this cook until one side chars a little bit, and then I'm gonna flip it over. I'm very, very excited to cook over fire, and it makes sense because there's actually evidence of people cooking on top of fire going back 1.8 million years ago. So people have been barbecuing for millions of years. George Washington was actually a really big fan of barbecue. He wrote about it in his journal a couple of times. He also wrote about this one time in particular in 1769 where he was at a barbecue rager all night long. That must have been one hell of a barbecue. Not only was he there all night, but he had to come home and write about it. All right, so my fish has been cooking for a few minutes. I've got a little bit of charring on the fins. I took a peek, and the flesh is starting to look tender and pull away from the bone. So I'm gonna get in here and give it a flip. I don't think they had oven mitts back then, but I think banana leaves are gonna make a fantastic set of oven mitts. Who needs tongs, right? All right. Oh, we lost a little bit of skin, but you know what? It's my first time grilling on these sticks, so I think it's pretty good. But yeah, you can see we've got starting to look almost cooked on one side, so it's gonna finish up on the other side. And now we're gonna grill our bulgogi. Okay, so for the bulgogi, I brought my hibachi grill from home because we really need intense, direct heat, which we're not gonna get so much with our bukan. So here I've lit some binchotan. It's a Japanese style of charcoal made from ubame oak. It gets very hot, it burns for a really long time, and it burns really clean, and it's my favorite charcoal. So this is very nice and hot right now. I'm gonna start grilling. This is gonna cook up very fast. It's literally gonna be like 2 minutes total, a minute per side. We want to make sure that the meat doesn't get too dried out, but we wanna still make sure that we get really nice char. So that marinade is gonna make this very, very, very tender. Like we have a lot of acid, we have a lot of salt, so we need a good bit of char to give us some texture. So I know when they're ready to flip, when they release for me. That's how I know they've gotten enough color. We don't have to worry about doneness. The meat is so thin, it will be done. But we need to get good caramelization. Look at that. I love those little bits of char. That plum syrup we put in here is getting nice and caramelized. These need a little bit longer. This one looks pretty good to go. You know you're ready to go when you get color. So this one's nicely colored on both sides. I'm gonna pull this guy off. And let's see, how are you doing? Ooh, yeah, that's looking good. I'm gonna move this one over because it feels like this is the hot part of the grill. But I don't like to touch them too much because they are gonna stick until they're ready to not stick. You know what I mean? It's just like whenever you're cooking anything, it will release when it is ready to be flipped. Nothing's more exciting than sizzling beef. Gotta say, okay, good. Nice color, both sides. This is why you wanna not like too tightly pack your skewer so you get as much browning, caramelization as possible. That's where the flavor comes from. Ooh. Is there a skewer for everyone here? No, some people are gonna have to share skewers. But you know what? Sharing is caring. Oh yeah, there we go. Everybody's got some nice charring action, and now it's time to eat. All right, so I've taken my snapper off the bukan, the bulgogi off the hibachi, and I can't wait to dig in. This is probably the most excited I've been to taste something on ancient recipes. The original bulgogi this is based off of would not have had sam wraps. That came around a little bit later, and they wouldn't have had samjang, but they did have the ingredients for samjang. So I'm gonna build myself a little wrap. Start with a little bit of this samjang, smear it on. You don't need too much because our meat is seasoned, and this is very salty and funky, just like the marinade we put on our beef. Okay, a little bit of rice. There must be rice. It really helps like temper all the aggressive flavors in that marinade. And it's a nice texture too. And then I'm gonna just get on in here, slide off a piece. Really nice char. I'm going in. First bite. I chew slowly. That has not changed since season 1. So, first off, the meat is super, super, super tender. It's just like the perfect texture, not only from cutting it thinly across the grain, but from that marinade, but it's punchy. I definitely taste that funky, funky doenjang paste. Nice caramelization, nice texture, not just from the caramelization, but from the lettuce. And I mean, it's delicious. I think that I can eat all of this. I also, from now on, I'm gonna skewer my bulgogi because it just makes it so much easier to handle on the grill. I know this is an ancient recipe, but you should just go make this like now. Like, you don't, these are ancient recipes that are worth making. I love the taste of the charcoal. You can really, really taste it in the meat. The charred bits are my favorite bits. I mean, this is perfect, delicious, wonderful. Everybody go make this. I don't know what else to say. It's just so, so freaking good. Okay, so for the snapper, I've got a few accoutrements. These are things that they would have had back then in Puerto Rico. So we've got some pineapple, some mamey, and some cassava bread, which I've never had before. So I'm really excited about this. It's really dry. It's like a cracker. And it's like a coarsely ground cassava flour, it seems like. Very crisp, very dense. This feels ancient. All right, let me get into the fish. I'm just going in with my hands. You know, that feels right to me. So you can tell the fish is nicely cooked because it just pulls away from the bones really easily, really cleanly. Look at those clean bones. Okay, I'm gonna have a little bit on its own. You really, really taste the wood flavor. It almost has like the same kind of smokiness that you get when you have smoked fish, like smoked sable, hot smoked salmon. But then you get a totally different flavor profile because of the ají dulce and the culantro. I'm really surprised by how much earthiness I'm getting from the achiote and like nice little warm allspice notes in the back. It's really, really delicious. And I think regardless of what the paste on top is, it's just so flavorful because of that wood. But I'm gonna try this mamey too. I don't know a lot about mamey. I've only had it like once before. It's a lot like papaya. Really tender, sweet, and you know how papaya and a lot of tropical fruits have like that hit of funk? It's got that. It's really great with the fish. This is a very, very tasty meal. I would want to have it exactly like this again. Like the culantro, it starts out like super pungent and really aggressive when you taste that paste raw, but once you cook it and it gets some time like low and slow on the grill, it develops so much like deep, earthy flavor. I really, really recommend like seeking out culantro, but of course you could totally make this same thing with cilantro, but this is just like, this makes it like next level. This is super delicious. I think this is the best way to kick off our summer episodes with the tastiest spread on ancient recipes yet. I'm really excited to see what other tasty things that we're gonna do this season. If you like this episode, be sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any other ancient barbecues you want me to try out, put it down in the comments and I'll see you next time here on Ancient Recipes.